Tonight on Diabetes Chat, we welcome back Liesl Richardson, a national Dafne trainer and quality assessor. Liesl became a diabetes specialist nurse in 1999 and a Dafne trainer and peer reviewer in 2005. Liesl was involved in the 5x1 Dafne random controlled trial. I think I got that right.
Yeah.
And the Dafne Plus pilot, and joined the Central Dafne team in 2017 as a national Dafne trainer and quality assessor. Liesl is currently involved in the redesign, development and delivery of the Dafne training portfolio. She is committed to increasing education and self-management skills for people with type 1 diabetes based on a shared philosophy and consistent information that fits within our evolving NHS. Welcome, Liesl, and thank you for joining us again tonight.
Thank you very much, Claire. I'm really pleased to be with you all again. Thank you.
Right, I'm going to skip the 90-second questions because I think I've just about covered it in the introduction.
Yeah. We don't know what you take to a desert island, but we'll live without.
Oh, we could ask that. If you're on a desert island, what 3 things would you take?
The first thing is a machete with a built-in sharpener. I've been giving these questions some thought. The second is all my photos. And the third is all the Outlander books, because then I'd have something practical, something to remember my family by, and books to get lost in.
Very well thought out.
Yeah, yeah.
And I like that you're low-tech, real desert island, rather than, I'll take my iPhone.
No.
my computer.
I couldn't charge it up, could I? There would be no good.
That doesn't worry people.
Yeah. I'm a long time listener of Desert Island Discs, so I've heard it all on there of what people are going to take with them on a desert island, but they're not allowed to take a machete, so I thought you haven't ruled that one out, so I'm going to put that one on my list.
Okay, I'm going to hand over to Flipper for the first part of the next section.
Thank you.
Right. I wasn't expecting starting this bit, so we before we talk about the Dafne course and what it does, can you just introduce yourself and just give us a bit more background on who you are, any connections to diabetes, and what you did leading up to working for Dafne?
Yeah. Okay. So I did my nurse training in London, and I moved up to Norfolk to marry a farmer, and I took the first job that was available, which was as a nurse on a surgical ward. And I absolutely hated diabetes, didn't understand it, hadn't ever really had, that I could remember, any worthwhile training. And if I was in charge of the ward and we had a patient on the ward with diabetes, I'd allocate that patient to a colleague so that I didn't have to look after them. And then one day the ward sister said, I need you to be the diabetes link nurse. And I thought, oh God, what does that mean? And she said, well, once a month you're going to go off to the diabetes centre at lunchtime. They'll give you lunch and you'll have a meeting about diabetes in the afternoon. And I thought, well, that sounds good. Get paid to sit down and have lunch. That sounds ideal. So not exactly the most altruistic of reasons, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And the very first meeting I went to, they were talking about how to do a finger prick glucose properly. Now, this is in the days of the old, we used to call them BM sticks. I don't know if any of you remember those, where you put the big blob of blood on a strip, you wipe it off, you wait 60 seconds and you have a look at the colour. And I realised I'd been doing it wrong my whole career since I'd trained.
Oh my goodness.
And that was because there was no consistent training amongst staff. And so somebody would teach you and they had been taught by someone else and they had been taught by someone else. And so every time something inaccurate got taught, it then got taught on and on and on. So that terrified me then, because I realised I was dangerous because I didn't understand something as basic as that. So that really got me interested, and I went off to do a post-registration diabetes course, which was a real eye-opener to me. And then I thought I knew it all. And I got a job in a diabetes centre as a diabetes specialist nurse, and then realised I didn't know anything at all. I think I came home in tears every night for the first fortnight, saying to my husband, what have I done? I'm never going to know enough. So that was in 99. And then in 2005, I was actively looking for jobs outside diabetes because I felt I'd got nothing else to offer. And I was told I was going to become a Dafne educator. And I went off to do my Dafne training, and it all made sense. And I just thought, I should have known this, like I know how to breathe, but it wasn't obvious to me, and it isn't obvious to the people who live with type 1 diabetes. So that was it. I was hooked, actually, completely and utterly hooked.
It's funny you should say that, because I was the same, because I'd just a little interview about me. I had type 1, I think it was 17 years when I did Dafne. And I went along not with the most positive attitude, may I just say. I went along because I promised my nurse I would. And I was giving it till lunchtime on the first day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I have to say, it changed my life. I could not believe what I had never been shown or told. And I was diagnosed in a time when you didn't carb count.
Yeah.
Because I was in the 90s.
Yeah.
And it's quite interesting you saying it from the other side of the Dafne, that you were the same.
Yeah.
Which is that. So obviously starting doing Dafne and what it offers, in your opinion, what are the main things that you feel Dafne offers people with type 1? If you had to give a little of a spiel, I'm sort of promoting and selling this to somebody, what are the core values that you think it gives people?
Okay. I think peer support, for a starter. There are so many people who say, I've never spoken to somebody else with type 1 diabetes, and I hadn't done until I did my Dafne course. And I have a wonderful group of people who were on my second ever Dafne course, who still meet up every 2 or 3 months for lunch on a Saturday. So they've been supporting each other for the best part of 17, 18 years. And they'd never have got that without coming on the Dafne course. So I think peer support is one. The second is good, solid, practical information that takes away the guilt of trying to self-manage type 1 diabetes. It gives people, I think what people have said to me is it gives them permission not to panic if they're out of target, and not to react to every glucose that is out of target, because so many times they've gone to clinic and felt they've been told off. You've got too many readings above target, and you're not doing this well enough, and you're not doing that well enough. And yet I can remember saying to somebody, wow, your glucose has been really steady for 2 whole days. That's really great. He said, yeah, but they're steady at 19. And I said, yeah, but you haven't had a hypo for 2 days, which is the first time in 5 years. And once you start correcting, you might find that you're steady at 15 for a couple of days, and then 13 for a couple of days. And as long as you haven't got ketones and things are going in the right direction, then there's no need to panic. And I think that's a big thing, is people feeling that they haven't got to react every time. So peer support, taking away the guilt, hopefully, and good, solid, practical information.
And I suppose one thing I'm just going to put in, which I also say, it's so much more than carb counting.
Completely, yeah.
Because I think some people, they come saying, well, I know how to count carbs, and like, no. This is everything. It covers everything, sort of thing. And I always think that's sometimes not pushed enough, that it's not just carb counting. And I always say to people, the worst that's going to happen is you find out you do everything beautifully.
Yes, yeah. And it's not uncommon for people to say to us, well, I don't think I really need Dafne because I already carb count. And then you ask, what would you like to be different about your life with diabetes? And that's the thing, because then they say, well, actually, I gave up running when I got diabetes and I'd really like to do that again. Or I've got my finals coming up at uni and my glucose goes really high when I'm stressed, and I don't want to be feeling really tired when I'm trying to sit my finals. And so often there's a way then of saying, well, actually, Dafne's more about carb counting, so we might be able to help you take up cycling again. We might be able to get you through your finals without having really high glucose readings. So when you find out what people want to be different about their life with diabetes, it's good to have something to offer that isn't just well, you've been doing it wrong all these years, you need to do it my way, because that's not what Dafne is about.
Yeah, it is. It's just a set of principles to apply.
Yeah.
Rather
and
than
it's a starting point, Flipper. You know, it's like, this is where we would suggest you start, and this is how you might want to move on. And if that's you might be textbook in how you move on, but you might not be, but at least you've got a solid start, and then you can start to see and adapt. It's a bit like passing your driving test. You know, I think of myself as a Dafne educator. I was like a driving instructor. You know, I teach people the basics and help them learn the basics, but it's not until you pass your driving test that you really learn how to drive.
Yeah. Oh no, that's great. So you yourself now, do you still actually run courses, or what does your role now involve?
So I don't work with people with type 1 anymore. My role is as a national Dafne trainer. So I help along with my boss, Sally Walgar, who is phenomenal, I have to say. We develop the Dafne education for people with type 1, but then we also develop the education for the healthcare professionals that are going to deliver Dafne to people with type 1 diabetes, and then we train them. So we train diabetes specialist nurses, diabetes specialist dietitians, and diabetes doctors in the Dafne principles. And that's my job now, is to do that training, teaching. I mean, I'm passionate about Dafne. You might not have picked that up from what I'm saying, how I'm talking. But I'm absolutely passionate because I have seen it change lives. And I think if I can impart an ounce of that enthusiasm and passion to another healthcare professional, then I hope that has a positive impact on those of you who live with type 1 diabetes, really. That sounds really big-headed, and I don't mean it to be. I just think those of us who are passionate and enthusiastic and who really want people. I have a niece with type 1 diabetes, and she was diagnosed 11 years ago, and I want her to have the best, and I want all the healthcare professionals she comes into contact with to communicate with her effectively and appropriately, and not judge her, and not look at her and say, well, you're not doing well enough, you need to do this better. So that's my reason for doing it, really.
I think that's one of the things that Dafne, I sort of walked away with. I walked into that room thinking I was the worst person with type 1, because that was my life, had been at clinic and stuff.
Yeah.
And within a couple of hours, I was sat there thinking, I'm not the worst. I'm just a person with type 1, because everybody else is the same. Because I imagined everybody else kept in target range, because that was the impression I was given. So for me, it was like the mental way. So, I mean, I'm passionate about Dafne as well from the other side, but how is it that people access Dafne? Is it available everywhere? How would you, gain it?
The sticking point.
Sort of what are some of the barriers and difficulties? Because we know some people like it's waiting lists, or
So Dafne is NHS. So we are an NHS organisation hosted by Northumbria NHS Healthcare Foundation Trust. And so we are available nationally. I think there's now 114 Dafne centres, but we are not a standard structured education packet for people with type 1 diabetes across the UK. So what happens is individual diabetes services are required to provide education for people with type 1 diabetes, and the integrated care boards, which are the old commissioning groups, they decide what education they will be able to afford and what they want to put on. And services can put a business plan together, present it to the integrated care board, and then they make the decision about whether they're going to offer Dafne or something else. Now, we obviously think that Dafne is gold standard, and not that I'm biased or anything, and therefore we think it should be available everywhere, but we're not in charge of those funding decisions. So some people can't access it because it isn't in their local service. Some people, because the service is only commissioned to deliver maybe 5-6 courses a year, and maybe they've got 100 or 200 people on their waiting list. And depending on what course you run, the most you'll probably put on a course is 8 or 9 people at a time. And then it's going to take a long time to get through the waiting list. So that's why we wish it was centrally funded, and then it would just be everywhere like a rash, and it would be much easier for people to do it.
And this is just a question just because of personal experience here. When I took Dafne, which was a lot of years ago, when was it? 2012. It was run locally by the community DSNs, because at that point the community DSNs was who you saw. So I got to know the people I was seeing, and they got to know me as a person more than, oh, it's her again turning up with, you know, whatever. And it was really good building that relationship and getting to know the local dietitian. But I know that's changed now, that within the area they do one. So you could have it with clinicians who are nothing to do with your care. Right. And I wonder how that affects the follow-up aspect of it. Because the nice thing about me was I had these people's contacts. So after Dafne, I wasn't contacting them every day, don't worry. But do you know, like if I had an issue, I would contact them saying, okay, I've done this, this and this, like it said on Dafne. It isn't working. What am I not seeing?
That's a tricky one, because, yes, as you say, traditionally you would have attended a Dafne course within your own service, and that still happens in many centres. So as somebody on the course, you get to know your educators as people and not somebody in a uniform, and we get to know you. And I have to say, that was for me, that was one of the best bits about the whole thing, is actually having an equal relationship with everybody in the room, and nobody was top dog. There was no hierarchy. We were all just people in the room talking about type 1 diabetes and how to live with it effectively, you know. I think sometimes there are large centres that deliver Dafne on 3 or 4 different sites, and you may get to attend the course on your own site where you go to for your care, but in order to get you on a course, they might have to send you to a different site with different healthcare professionals. But you could still get Dafne follow-up in your own centre. The difficulty comes if you're in a centre that doesn't run, say you're looked after in the community and they don't deliver Dafne. So they send you up to a secondary care or hospital service, and then they send you back. And that can be a challenge for people if they then don't have somebody Dafne trained to go to for follow-up. One of the things we're trying to overcome with that is we've got free training available for people, for diabetes specialist nurses and diabetes dietitians who don't work in a Dafne centre, to do the online learning about insulin dose adjustment and carb counting, so they can be aware of the Dafne principles and how they work. And that's available to people who are not in a Dafne centre. So that might be helpful.
That sounds really helpful and really good, because then you're all singing from the same hymn.
Exactly. Yeah.
But also it takes away some of the peer support as well.
Yeah.
Because they're not in your locale. Do you have any offerings at all? I know I was looking at your website are you looking at expanding for people with type 2 diabetes?
Yeah, we are. We're currently about to launch the pilot of the Victor course, which is for people with type 2 diabetes who are on multiple daily injections. Because that number of people is growing all the time. And so this is going to be very similar to Dafne, but it's going to be focused very much more on the issues that face people with type 2 diabetes.
Yeah.
So it's going to talk about increasing insulin sensitivity, moving more, all that, just things that, and finding things that people can take on depending on their current health. So it's not about telling everyone to go jogging every day. It's not about telling people to eat certain foods. It's a realistic way of saying, let's help you manage your type 2 while you're on multiple daily injections. And that's about to go out to pilot. We're about to start training educators. So we've got Dafne educators who are going to take on the Victor role in the pilot and deliver the Victor course. And that's going to start imminently. I think the training of of the healthcare professionals has already started.
And will that be a similar format, as in like 5 days or 5? I know they do it together, separate, some online, some whatever, but a similar intensity.
Currently, it's going to be it's going to be done remotely, but so it's going to be some online learning, which is what we've got now with Remote Dafne. So Victor, some online learning each week, and then the face-to-face sessions can be done face-to-face in a room all together, or they can be done remotely using something like Microsoft Teams.
Yeah.
And each local service can make that decision based on the facilities and the availability that they've got.
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
So I'm going to hand over to Claire for the next little section. Thank you.
Thanks, Philippa.
Thank you.
It's been really interesting so far, Liesl. We've had a couple of comments from the community. Gillian says training is so important. The day that she was diagnosed by her GP with a formal type 1 diagnosis, she went and consulted Dr. Google and found the Bertie course. That was January 2020. If she hadn't have taken the initiative, she'd still be waiting for clinic input. And Kez has said that Katie is the course in her area. She waited 2 years for access to education, which she said she knows isn't long compared to others, but it was still too long in her view.
Yeah.
She was already burnt out and struggling.
Yeah. I think that's a huge issue, because I think when you look online, there's so much information out there. I remember when my mum had breast cancer, and I went online to see what information I could find, and I realised I didn't know what I could trust and what I couldn't. And I found it more daunting looking online at stuff, and more scary, because I didn't know what I was looking for. I didn't know how to wheedle out the crackpots from the genuine healthcare professional websites. So I would agree. I think education is crucial. I think tech is brilliant. Since the sensors have come on board with Libra or with Dexcom, I think they're brilliant. But I think in isolation, they work a little bit, but backed up with education, they can work brilliantly. Yeah. The difficulty with offering Dafne straight away to somebody with type 1 diabetes is they might still be honeymooning. Is that a phrase everybody's familiar with?
Yeah.
So if somebody's honeymooning, I've looked after people who have honeymooned and they've been on 2 units of background insulin in the morning and 2 units at bedtime, and they've not needed any quick acting. And so to put them on a Dafne course soon after diagnosis would have been dangerous, because they'd have been expecting to take insulin for stuff that they didn't need to take it for. So we would say at least 6 months, or when they're out of the honeymoon phase. So some people can be in that honeymoon phase for a few weeks, some for a few months. I've had somebody that was in it for probably over a year. And then once they start to come out of it, that's when you bring them in and put them on the Dafne course. So it's nice to be able to say to somebody at diagnosis, look, we're going to bring you on a Dafne course because that's part of the treatment for type 1 diabetes. It's too soon at the moment because you're honeymooning, you're still quite insulin sensitive, so you don't need a lot of injectable insulin. But once that starts to wear off, which it will, then we'll bring you in on a Dafne course, so that somebody doesn't have to wait too long post honeymoon before they get that information. I couldn't tell you what exactly happens now because I'm not working clinically now, so I don't know what goes on. I suspect there are some places where they still would say this dose of basal insulin in the morning, this much at bedtime, and take 2 or 3 units or 4 units of a quick acting insulin at each of your meals. That might still be happening. What used to happen when I was working as a DSN is that we would see somebody in clinic, start them on insulin, and we would be on the phone to them each day. We'd get them back hopefully within that first week. If we saw them on a Monday as newly diagnosed, we would try and see them again face to face before the Friday and phone them each day, check how they're doing. They had our phone numbers so they could ring us if they needed to, and we would try and have quite intensive input with them for the first 4 weeks, and then maybe it would go to fortnightly and then a little bit longer. I think I was listening to what you were saying earlier on about peer support. When I started doing Dafne, there was no such thing as WhatsApp. There was no such thing as Facebook Messenger. So you couldn't set up your own support groups as a group of people with type 1 diabetes. So that's been a huge bonus for people doing structured education, because they can set up their own WhatsApp groups and get that peer support while they're on the course, but then afterwards as well. And sometimes it's tricky with peer support at diagnosis, because I don't know, and maybe it's me overthinking it as a healthcare professional. If you have an 18, 19-year-old who's just been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and the person that wants to offer the support and be a peer supporter is, I don't know, their granny's age, and I would worry that I might match people up incorrectly or inappropriately. So I think as a healthcare professional, that would be a concern of mine for peer support. Whereas we throw a Dafne group together, we don't plan who goes in the course. We just pick those 8 people off the top of the waiting list, and we put you all in a room together. And 99 times out of 100, it just works. Yeah.
Question I've got, Liesl, is the training only available for the person with type 1 diabetes, or can family members and friends attend the full course and be part of it?
It's usually just for the person with type 1 diabetes, particularly if you're doing a face-to-face course, for lots of reasons. One is, if you're on a face-to-face course and you've got 8 participants, if they each bring somebody with them, you've got 16 people to manage. And that risks one of the people or more of the people that have got type 1 not having a voice. We have always said that we have always invited partners or significant others or good friends to come to the sessions on sick day rules and hypoglycemia, because those are the situations where you might need help from somebody else. But actually attending the whole course, that's usually if somebody has a very specific need, if they've got a visual impairment, or if they've got a pre-existing condition that means it's difficult. I've had somebody who had a pre-existing condition, and she said, look, I'm fine to come, but actually my concentration wanes by about lunchtime. So her partner came and attended the whole course, and he sat and learnt everything alongside her, so that when they were at home, he could support her more closely. And that would be a local decision for each Dafne centre. You've also got to get permission from the other people on the course, because obviously the confidentiality is an issue. So there's a lot more to consider than, it would be lovely if your other half could go, but it's the other people. All of you have got to benefit from being on that course. You've all got to have an opportunity to speak. And if there are 16 people there instead of 8, that's going to halve your opportunity for talking time.
Okay, thank you for that. Going back to the Victor pilot.
Yeah.
How do people become part of it if they want to?
So at the moment, we have some Dafne centres that have signed up to deliver the Victor pilot for us. So we sent out in our newsletter some months ago asking for Dafne centres to volunteer to take part in the pilot. So those centres have now been identified. They've identified the educators that are going to do the Victor educator training, and they will be recruiting people from their service to do those pilot Victor courses.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
So I would say, if there's anybody on the call today, if there's anybody on diabetes chat this evening with type 2 diabetes who's on multiple daily injections, just check if your centre's a Dafne centre and if they're doing the Victor pilot.
I'm actually, well, there's some debate on whether I'm type 1 or type 2.
Right.
My actual diagnosis at the moment is type 2.
Right.
But they do think that I'm actually type 1. But I have never had any education.
Right.
I've been diabetic for 29 years. And I've never had any structured education. I've done the Bertie online course under my own back, the same as Gillian. But that's only been recently. So
I think we have to be able to, it's a complex issue, because a lot of the learning now is online, and any of you that have done Dafne in the past, if you did it face to face, your Dafne Centre can give you the login details and you can go online and have access to that online information all the time. So if you wanted to refresh your knowledge of exercise or sick day rules or something like that, you could do that. But then we have to pay the Open University to host that. And we have to pay people to write it and update it and develop it. And so offering something nationally free of charge would be really tricky without central funding. So yeah, it is. It is. The other thing about Dafne is it's knowing what is the nugget in Dafne that makes it work. And I don't think we really can say what that is. Is it that you have peer support from other people with type 1 in a way you've never had it before? Is it that you work together with people with type 1 and you recognize that you stumble over the same issues, you have anxiety about the same issues, but you also can laugh about the same things? Is it that you develop a relationship with your healthcare professionals that you've never had before, one of trust, mutual respect, no judgment, no stigma? Is it the Dafne principles, how to use your insulin, how to carb count, or is it everything rolled in together? Yeah. I would say, Claire, I did want to say, the person on my Dafne course that had had diabetes the longest had had it for 62 years.
Wow.
And that person came on the Dafne course to prove that they didn't need a Dafne course. And to prove that after 62 years, they knew what they were doing. And at the end of the first day, that person came up to me and said, I must apologise. I've learned so much in one day that I'm not going to be a pain in your neck anymore. I'm going to just get on and do it. And I think it's easy for us to make an assumption that the longer you've had it, the more knowledge you must have.
I was just sort of on that vein a bit. I know in a lot of areas, and I know it's part of the NICE criteria, that before you can go on a pump, etc., you have to be competent at dose adjustment, carb counting, the basics before you go on, which makes sense. You're giving somebody a pump. If you haven't got the knowledge to use it, you're not going to get the most out. No. But I know that there's a lot of some areas that literally means you've got to wait until you've done Dafne until we'll give you a pump. And I know on my course, which is a lot of years ago now, there was one guy who was only there because he needed to sit through that course to get a pump, and he didn't want to participate in it. He didn't want to be there. So what are your feelings on the areas that put this down as, like, well, you've got to jump through this hoop else we're not doing anything? And I'm not saying that Dafne isn't a brilliant course, but
so Dafne didn't put that rule in.
No, I appreciate that, and that's why I'm asking you your opinion on those areas that do that.
I think we have to think very carefully about how we use the language around that, because if you say to somebody, yes, you can have a pump, but not until you've done a Dafne course, you're putting a huge barrier in the way between somebody doing injections and then maybe getting more comfortable with their diabetes control on a pump. But the way I look at it is that doing structured education is actually a huge stepping stone to using a pump safely. So actually it should be, yes, of course you can have a pump. We're going to put you on a Dafne course because that's where you're going to learn how to count your carbohydrate. You're going to learn about ratios. You're going to learn about insulin sensitivity and all of that kind of stuff. So when you get your pump, all you've then got to learn about is the practicalities of living with a pump. But if that's going to be a stepping stone, there have got to be lots of Dafne course stepping stones in that service to be able to do that. And that's where the funding is the issue.
Yeah, and I think also it brings out some negativity towards the course,
Absolutely.
Which isn't the course's fault. It's the way. And I do think it's how do you think Dafne, or what do you think Dafne could do to improve the way that Dafne is sold to patients before they attend?
We have this conversation with healthcare professionals who are training in Dafne, particularly with Dafne doctors, because I think for years now that many healthcare professionals, I won't say all because I'm not going to paint everybody with the same brush, but I think it's not uncommon for some healthcare professionals to think that fear is a motivator. And so it's not unheard of for healthcare professionals to just sit there and tell you what you should be doing for the sake of your health. And actually, if that hasn't ever worked, it's not going to work now. But what we say to the doctors is, don't keep scaring people. We say it to all of the healthcare professionals, don't keep scaring people and telling them that they should do Dafne for their own good, because none of us like to be told that. My GP might tell me for years that I've got to lose weight, but just because he tells me doesn't mean I'm going to do it. So I think it's, like I said a little while ago, it's finding out, what do you want to be different with your life with diabetes? It might be somebody wants to have a baby, but they can't get their HbA1c down before they get pregnant. So, okay, let's bring you on a Dafne course. Let's make sure you've got as much knowledge at your fingertips as possible to give you the best chance to get your HbA1c down so you can have a baby. It might be that somebody has had a severe hypo in the last year and they don't want to lose their driving license. So it's okay, let's bring you on a Dafne course and let's see if we can get to the bottom of this with you. So it's finding a hook for people, not because we want to sell you a Dafne course, but because we want to help you achieve what it is you want to be different. We can't take the diabetes away, but if we can help you do something that you want to do, then that's got to be your motivator, rather than me just telling you that it's a good thing and you ought to do it.
Yeah. And it's not just a tick box.
Exactly. Yeah.
No, thank you.
Okay, just before we move on to the next section, Kez has asked, what is the difference with those on the pump? She was the only pump user on her Katie course, so it was heavily focused on MDI, those on MDIs.
So we have Dafne for people on MDI, but we also have Dafne pump, and that's because there are some slight differences in carb counting between MDI and pump, because with a pump you can give fractions of units, can't you? Whereas if you're using MDI, the smallest amount of insulin you can give is half a unit. There are slightly different hypo treatments if you're on a pump, and there's also the safety features with a pump. You know, it's learning what to do if your pump goes wrong. When do you need to revert back to pens, and how do you do that? You might check for ketones sooner if you're on a pump than you would if you're on MDI. So it's a very different way of managing the same condition, and that's why we have two separate courses for MDI and pump.
Okay, thank you for that, Liesl. Kez, I hope that's answered your question. We'll move on to the main topic now. Now that hybrid closed loop is being rolled out, I believe that there is a new Dafne course being rolled out.
Yeah.
Called the Dafne closed loop for people with type 1.
Yeah.
So I'll pass over to you to let you tell the community about the course.
Thanks, Claire. So, as you know, NHS England announced probably nearly a year ago now that it wants to transition 60,000 people with type 1 diabetes onto a hybrid closed loop within what was then 5 years, but is now 4 years. And this is huge. This is just a massive bonus and a huge step forward, but it poses financial and logistical challenges to the diabetes services. The services want to do their best to deliver this, to implement it, but they have tight budgets. There are staff shortages, particularly after COVID. And the practical challenge of providing education for all of those people with type 1 that want a hybrid closed loop is really staggering. So to try and help with this, Dafne's put together the Dafne Closed Loop Essentials course for people who are not yet on a hybrid closed loop, but to give them an idea of what's involved, and so they can understand what they're taking on, and that it isn't just attach yourself to a sensor and a pump and forget about it. So it was initially available to Dafne centres, but we have had some very generous funding, sponsorship and education grants from Abbott, Dexcom, Insulet, Medtronic and Ipsomed, so that we can now make this training available free of charge to non-Dafne diabetes services. So if you go to a hospital or a community type 1 service that doesn't deliver Dafne, you and your healthcare professionals can have free access to the closed loop essentials course. Essentially, it means you don't have to go to any group sessions. It's all done in an online unit hosted by the Open University. So your service can apply to Dafne for access. They can share that access with you. You can then go on and do the course at home in your own time. You need a Wi-Fi connection, a PC, a tablet, possibly a mobile phone, but tablets or PCs would work better. And it covers all sorts of things like insulin and giving a bolus, the more relaxed ways of carb counting when you're on a closed loop, so that you don't have to be so accurate in your carb counting, what to do if it goes wrong, the different effects of food and how the closed loop will step in and deal with slight over or underestimations in your carb counting, what to do if you're ill, what to do if it goes wrong. So it basically covers all the basic information that you need if you're going to use a closed loop. And then there's a little questionnaire at the end just for you to check your understanding. So then if there's a particular aspect of it that you haven't understood very well, you can send your little quiz results to your diabetes specialist nurse or a diabetes dietitian or your doctor. And then when you do see them to talk about closed loop, they can tailor make the education for you, rather than just seeing lots of people in individual appointments or big group appointments and repeating the basics all the time and never knowing whether you've actually understood it or not. So that's essentially what it's there for, so that you can get access to that good, basic, essential information. It'll help you decide if you actually want to use a hybrid closed loop or if you don't. And if you do decide you want it, then you can then share your quiz results with your healthcare team, and they can basically provide you with individualized information for the bits that you want to know more about. And that's essentially what that's there for. What we're also working on to release next year is the closed loop optimization course. So if any of you have used a hybrid closed loop for 6 months or a year and you're not seeing the results you were hoping to see, then you could, this would be for a Dafne centre, you could then attend the closed loop optimization course, which will be slightly shorter than a Dafne course, but would then help you to explore what you might be able to do differently with the closed loop system to get the results you want. So that's essentially where we are, and that's what we're doing. You need to be in an NHS service to access the Dafne closed loop course, but you don't have to be in a Dafne centre. You need to have type 1 diabetes, and you need to be in the UK, Republic of Ireland, or a Crown dependency, essentially.
That sounds really, really good, because I've used hybrid closed loop. I used to do the DIY loop before I switched to commercial.
Yeah.
And I think because I DIY'd,
yeah,
I know, but there you know a lot more about how the system works and how the algorithm works.
Yeah.
That I think some people, there's no education, or a lot of centres don't educate people on how to work with the system. And they're still using techniques they used when they were just using a standard pump.
Yeah.
And you can't do that because you're working against the algorithm.
Yeah.
And you're never going to win.
Yeah.
It's going to go that. So where you were saying people who don't see the results, if there's something there that you could optimize or get people thinking of how it's like exercise. Some people say, oh no, well, I always make sure I'm 9 before I start. And I'm like, but your system's going to be trying to correct you.
Yeah.
And you're going to have loads of insulin on board. You need to be lower. You need to be lower.
But it's also, if you sit in an office job all day, Monday to Friday, and then you go on a skiing holiday for a fortnight, the first week, the algorithm is going to be giving you insulin based on your sedentary working life. And then for the second week that you're skiing, it's going to be great. But then when you come back to your sedentary job, it's still going to be adjusting from when you were skiing the week before. And it's got to catch up and see what's happening.
Yeah, I think there's some people are scared to turn off the loop. And that might not be Daphne's solution to those things. And I use a T-Slim, so it's a standard. I set the basals, the profile, which is one of the reasons I like it. Is if I know I'm going to be active, or if I'm ill tomorrow, I can just whack up all my settings and still loop. But if I didn't have that, I would just turn off loop. But a lot of people are very reticent to let go. I may not have the basic knowledge, depending if they've gone straight onto a closed loop.
And I think that's the issue. And just in simple terms, to equate it to when the Libra sensors came out, because when the Libra sensors came out, they were incredible, but people were reacting to a post-meal glucose. So they might have had, I don't know, say they've had a lot of carbs for their lunch. So an hour later, their Libra was telling them that they were way above target. And they were thinking, oh my goodness, I've got to take some more quick acting. So they would correct too quickly. And then actually, because the quick acting could take 3 or 4 hours to complete its work, they were then stacking insulin on board and having crashing hypos. So I think you said earlier on, it's all very well having the tech, but you need the education to go with it. So the closed loop essentials course won't go into a lot of detail about managing exercise and things like that, because it's an essentials course. It's an introduction to using a hybrid closed loop to help people make a decision about whether they want one, and to find out what other information they need. So for somebody like you who's been doing it yourself and you've been using the DIY system of closed looping, you may find when you look on the essentials course, well, there's only 1 or 2 things in there that I've learned. But if those 1 or 2 things are helpful, then that's great. And it is free. It's free to you. It's free to the healthcare professionals. It's free to the Dafne services. It's free to the non-Dafne services. Non-Dafne services need to just get in touch with the Dafne central office, and they will give them access to it.
And I always say, you never know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And like you were saying, I may have been DIYing for years, but actually not know what there are people who don't know what they're doing on all systems.
Yeah. And it's true in all walks of life, not just diabetes, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh no, that sounds great.
Yeah. I think it's just making sure that people have access to some information, because I think that's otherwise what is sadly lacking in all sorts of aspects of the health service, is just providing information in an accessible format.
Yeah. And it was only recently I saw somebody, I think it was a clinician, posted online, sick day rules for hybrid closed loop. And I hadn't seen something that was specific for hybrid closed loop.
Yeah.
And I've got a screenshot of it on my phone, and in Facebook groups I'm in, and on Twitter or something. If somebody's saying that and they're on a hybrid closed loop, I just like, oh, not sure if I've got the hybrid closed loop ones. And just sort of whiz it off, because they are slightly different.
Yeah. So on the closed loop essentials course, we don't call it sick day rules. We call it trace ketones management and large ketones management. So that you might have ketones because you're ill, but you might also have ketones because there's a disconnection with the pump. And so that's all covered in the essentials courses. Problems with your system, managing when you have trace of ketones, managing when you have large ketones, and then if you have to go back to pens, how to do that.
And that is such an important one, because so many people, when did I go on a pump? 2013 is the last time I injected long acting.
Goodness me. That's music to my ears. Isn't that amazing? Yeah.
But if my pump breaks tomorrow,
have you got pens and have you got basal insulin?
I have got basal insulin. Because I have to be honest, only because I went on holiday earlier in the year, and I thought, I suppose I ought to take some, because I don't want to be, and I have had a pump failure, but I only had to do for 24 hours, and I just used short acting. just because I didn't want long acting in my system.
Mm.
But there's a lot of people who question that, like, well, what would I give myself? How? And somebody in one of the groups, and I don't know, because obviously it's clinical stuff, so you may not want to answer this. And I thought, oh, this is a good question. They wanted to take a pump holiday because they were going on holiday.
Yeah.
But they didn't know at what point to inject the long acting and turn off their pump. What was the overlap or no overlap?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to give advice clinically because I'm not a clinician anymore. But that's all covered in our closed loop essentials course.
Oh, you see, there you are. I can now say, go see if you're Dafne.
Yeah. And what we learned when we did remote Dafne, we did that in a very quick reaction to the lockdown when the pandemic started in 2020. And so we had limited access to stuff. But so there was a lot of there's a lot of reading for the Dafne course online, some videos. But what we've done with the closed loop essentials course is we've put more videos in rather than making people read too much. But you can speed them up, because if the narration is a bit slow, you can speed them up and listen to them a bit faster.
And this is just because in an earlier life I did teacher training, etc. Because you have the written things, is there a way that you could post both? Just because I know with me, I find watching videos sometimes I would prefer to read. So
usually
you've got an option between the two.
There's normally a transcript that goes with every video in the online unit, so you can read the transcript rather than watch the video.
Brilliant.
Yeah. And that's all about accessibility, isn't it? Yeah. Learning styles, and if somebody's hard of hearing, they want to read the transcript rather than listen to the video. Your style of learning, all that, it's there. The
sitting on a train, you don't have to worry about the connection.
Yeah.
Oh,
Liesl, I'm just conscious of the time. Are you okay for about 5, 10, 15 minutes?
Yeah, absolutely, Claire. Yeah.
Okay, we've had Liz come up to the speaker panel. I believe you've got a question, Liz. Do you want to ask Liesl? Nope, she's got her phone on mute, so I'll ask
that was
it.
me. Sorry. I had my mic turned off. Hi, Liesl. The question I have is, I'm based in Ireland. With regards to the different Dafne courses for how you're managing your type 1, whether you're using multiple daily injections or hybrid closed loop, can I ask, how's this managed here in Ireland, where the majority of people with type 1 diabetes are using MDI? Will they have to do a different or refresher course for using HCL, and how's it managed here? I do know that here in Ireland that the majority of pumps are HCL, and they have been for a number of years, but it's extremely hard to get them from your clinic if you if your clinic actually does do multiple or hybrid closed loop systems. I don't know whether you can answer that or not.
I may not be able to answer it fully. I know since COVID, we've taken on an awful lot of new Dafne centres in Ireland, Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. And so there are lots and lots of Dafne centres in Ireland and delivering remote Dafne courses. So I think they probably will have the same funding issues for HCL as any centre in England or Scotland or Wales or Jersey or the Isle of Man, is that it's all very
Northern Ireland
anyway.
We're completely different here in Ireland to Northern Ireland as well.
Yeah, because you wouldn't come under NHS, and it's NHS England that have said to do this. They haven't said it for Scotland, and it's not necessarily for Wales. But I think it's the funding thing. Is the centres would love to put people on closed loops, but they have to identify as a commissioning authority how they're going to allocate that money and where it's going to come from. And
sorry to cut across you there, Liesl, that wouldn't be the same issue here in Ireland with regards to funding, because our funding doesn't come via different trusts. It comes directly from our HSE,
Okay. So they will still
which
be
is the
setting,
same as the NHS.
yeah. So they'll still be setting budgets for things. And so the people providing the service will have to work out, or the HSE or the people providing the service will have to decide how much of the budget they can put aside for that. But also if they've got enough staff to deliver it, have they got enough trained staff to deliver it? Because what you don't want is somebody untrained just giving you a box with hybrid closed loop equipment in it and saying, there you go, there's your closed loop. So because I've never worked in Ireland other to go over to do training a few years ago, I don't know exactly how it's going to work. But I suspect they're facing similar funding and staffing issues to certainly to England and Wales and Scotland, and I assume Northern Ireland as well. I think after COVID, a lot of healthcare professionals were lost to the service, and they're struggling to build that back up.
But they've been giving Dafne training to new users that are have gone straight onto a HCL. So how has that been managed here? Or can you even answer that?
So somebody going onto a hybrid closed loop is being put on a Dafne course for MDI?
Well, that's what I'm asking you. Is there different courses being run here in Ireland for whether you're, well, again, MDI, all the people that have been on the Dafne MDI course are now moving over to a pump. We'll call it a pump because that's what it's called here.
Yeah.
It's not called hybrid closed loop system because they've had those here for years. But the people that are moving onto closed loop systems, are they given a refresher course, a Dafne refresher course, before they're given the hybrid closed loop systems?
I don't know. That's my honest answer. I don't know.
That's grand. That's fine.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, and that's grand. That's a question I can ask here.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much for your information.
No worries. No worries.
But can I just add in on that, and Liesl, you can agree or disagree. In the UK, you're not necessarily given a refresher. It's just if you have completed a Dafne at some point.
We don't have a formal Dafne refresher course. I think most centres struggle to get through their waiting list to get somebody on a Dafne course the first time.
Yeah.
What some centres offer refresher mornings or afternoons or evenings or a half day at the weekend, where they invite all their Dafne participants who have completed the course to come to an information day where they'll get peer support, and there might be little workshops going on to do with exercise or sick day rules or something that people can join in if they want to. Others, which is what we also recommend, is doesn't matter when you did your Dafne course, you can still be given access to the new online information. So the online course that people do now for remote Dafne, and that is always going to be updated really quickly when there's a new change. So if you have access to the remote Dafne online units for people with type 1 diabetes, you can dip in and out of that whenever you like. If you're worried about something at 3 a.m, you can just log in on your phone or your tablet and have a look and get that information straight away. So that's available, and that's often now offered to people who did Dafne years ago, just so that you've got that at your fingertips if you need it.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Sorry, Liesl, can I just ask, sorry for interrupting there, is that the same case here in Ireland, do you know?
If you've got Dafne centres, and I think most of the Dafne centres in Ireland are delivering remote Dafne. So yes, they can offer you, if you've done Dafne in the past, they can give you access to the remote Dafne course for people with type 1 diabetes, and you can use that as a reference.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Sorry for interrupting.
No worries.
Okay, guys, before I finish off with a few questions I've got, does anybody else have any questions? Anybody on the panel or anybody that's listening?
I've got one. Just about gaining access to Dafne. I've had type 1 for 51 years. and tried since getting a pump in 2014 to get on a course. And it's taken a lot of trouble to get one, but I've just done the closed loop essentials course online. But I want to be able to do the follow-up one after that. And my area doesn't support Dafne at all.
Right.
So what do you do in that case?
That I can't answer with any authority, really. I think, and that is the issue with structured education not being centrally funded by the National Health Service, because then local areas make local decisions, so it becomes a postcode lottery, really.
It is.
It's whether there is a service near you that you don't access at the moment but is close enough for you to access that maybe is a Dafne service.
No, there's a course, it's called Food Freedom, but I was refused it because I was already on a pump.
Okay.
They haven't, and the dietitian at the hospital isn't pump trained either, so
right.
I'd like to pass their information on so you can train them, actually, because I think there's a big gap in what's available.
I think it might be worth, it's difficult to get, it's not always easy to get new centres on board because they have to put their business case together and it has to be approved.
Yeah.
But if they're interested, just let them know that Dafne provides free training for people who are not in a Dafne, for healthcare professionals who are not in a Dafne centre, to learn about the Dafne principles, because if that makes them realise that there's something out there, maybe that just might encourage the team to want to become a Dafne centre.
Yeah.
I wish I had a different answer for you, I really do.
Yeah, well, it has been a total battle, and not having done the original one, even though I had online access, it didn't make a lot of sense.
And I think you could look at the Dafne online stuff, having never done a Dafne course, and you could look at remote Dafne for MDI, but that wouldn't be relevant for you now because you're on a pump. You could go and look at the pump Dafne course now, but again, what's online is only part of what the pump Dafne course is all about.
Absolutely.
So it would still leave you with gaps in your knowledge, which could be really tricky. What would be my wish? Well, after a cure for type 1 diabetes, which is my first wish, I think my next wish would be for structured education to be available for all of you when you needed it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think my life would have been very different if I'd had any education, but being diagnosed in 1973, there was nothing.
Because we didn't know very much in 1973, I should think.
No.
Either. I think there's a bit of a kickback. I think some healthcare professionals, not many, but some healthcare professionals believe that to go on a structured education course that lasts 5 days is asking too much of somebody with type 1 diabetes. But I would argue that this is something you're going to have to live with forever, and 5 days out of forever is not very much. And I don't think I've ever had anyone on a Dafne course who said, that was a bit long. Most people on the Friday would say, can we come back on Monday, please? Because we think there must be a lot more to know. But I think until you've, as a healthcare professional, until you've had that experience and you've had people say, I wish I could come back on Monday, 5 days just isn't enough. It's very difficult to believe that people would be willing to take 5 days off work or 5 days out of their normal life. Remote Dafne is not that many days in a group session, but with the online learning that you would do at home in your own time, it's about 5 days. And anybody that thinks it's too long, we'd say, well, what would you take out? Well, actually, we wouldn't take out anything. So I think it's tricky. It's tricky. I'm obviously passionate and a real advocate for education for anybody with type 1 diabetes who wants it. But if it was only up to me, if I was Prime Minister tomorrow, that would be the first thing I would do, I think, is just make it available for everybody. I don't know. Certainly, if it would be great if you could all go online and say how fabulous it was when you did your Dafne course, and it should be available to everyone, and 5 days learning isn't too much when you're going to live with something for the rest of your life, then yeah, text in the post, I'll pay you all later, thanks very much. You just crisis manage, don't you? You crisis
That has
manage.
been my life, quite honestly. Hypo management, you know. Yeah, and I feel quite angry about it, actually, because I've tried and said I want to do the course, and other people have done courses when they don't want to, and it's like, it's so frustrating.
It is. I would agree. And a lot of people who come on a Dafne course, they come not because they're running above target a lot of the time, but because they're having lots of hypos.
Absolutely.
And it's just understanding what they can do differently to turn that around. Yeah.
And I think there are quite a few others that advocate for it online. So I know I've sort of seen people saying, oh, I've got to do this because of that. And I'm like, look, the worst that's going to happen is you walk away realizing you knew everything.
Yeah.
But I doubt you will have. You will pick up things, or even if you don't, you'll make a relationship with the clinicians that run the course, and you will gain from it.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like, I think we do sell it, and we've or not sell it, but do you know what I mean? Say
promote
no, it's more than that. It's
defend
more
it
than
and
that.
promote it.
Yeah.
Would you take type 1s on as to learn the course so that they could deliver it? I need a job. I want to do something constructive, you know.
Well, leave it with me. I'll take that back to take that back to my bosses.
Absolutely.
I need a job as well, Liesl.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
There's 2 of us.
I've got a queue of you lining up. That's great.
Well, I am a nurse, but I'm not a diabetes specialist nurse yet.
No, why is it only open to healthcare professionals? I mean, you know.
What, to do the educator training?
Yeah.
I guess a lot of that comes down with carrying the risk of what information you provide, and I should imagine it's giving clinical information and how that sits within a legal framework of providing healthcare.
Yeah,
because you are adjusting people's doses on the course.
Theoretically, you're not, because you're supporting people to make the decisions for themselves. You're not actually telling them what to do.
Yeah.
In theory, you shouldn't. An educator shouldn't be telling you what to do with your insulin. They should be helping you make your own decision. That's what the Dafne philosophy is all about. It's about, you're responsible for your diabetes 365 days of the year.
Yeah.
Why is it that one day a year when you go and see a doctor, or once or twice a year you see a dietitian or a diabetes specialist nurse, they suddenly wrestle that responsibility off you and tell you what you should be doing?
Oh yeah, no, and I've done it, and I agree with you, but you do have the healthcare professionals there just as a
backup,
looking out.
If they thought you were going to kill yourself, they would step in.
Exactly. Oh, Mark's got his hand up. Mark, have you got a question?
I was just going to make a comment, but going back a long time ago when I was doing labs at university, there was always postgraduates who were there in the chemistry labs to help us. Perhaps there is scope within Dafne to have sort of like, alumni, for want of a better term, there, because obviously we have got more lived experience. Does that make sense? Do you understand?
Yeah.
So absolutely. I mean, because you can tell people how to treat a hypo, but you don't know what it's like to get hypo munchies. Yeah, so having 15 grams of carb when you are fit, you want to literally eat the whole fridge. We know about that, and I just wonder if that would be something that might be, because the thing was for me, I mean, I was diagnosed in '89, and as you can see in the comments I put about how I use BM sticks back with the Autolet, and I put a nice picture of that. So, yes, but and Dafne was one of the first times I've ever sat with other diabetics, if I'm honest, in a talking about diabetes. Sorry, Partha and Co for didn't use your title for your thing, but actually talking about it outside, because clinics, it's like, no, I don't know whether it's wrong to say this, but it does feel like sometimes like you're going to see the headmaster to have your bookmarked, or it used to. It's getting better slowly, but that's one of the amazing things of of Dafne and courses like it. I just wonder if sometimes having some of us who've alumni there might be an interesting thing to maybe think about.
Yeah, I think that's worth knowing. When I was still working clinically, we used to do Dafne recruitment evenings. So we would invite people from the waiting list to come to a meeting in the evening, and I would always have at least 2 of my Dafne course participants there to answer the questions. So myself and my lead Dafne doctor would start the session for about 5 minutes and then hand over to the people we'd invited to ask questions of the people that had already done the course. And that was always the most powerful motivator, was listening to someone who's already done it, who's living with type 1 diabetes, and could say, I went to a Thai restaurant for an eat all you could eat Thai buffet, and my glucose was 6.8 when I started and 6.9 when I finished, and I gave 6 quick acting injections because I took one each time I went up to the buffet. And people realizing that, oh my goodness, this person's really done it, and that's always very powerful. But because Dafne doesn't run the courses in the Dafne centres,
it's just a thought, that was all.
And I think it's a great thought. In fact, I've actually kind of almost stopped talking there because my brain was whirring. So that's another thing for me to take back to my bosses. So thank you for that.
Can I just add one other thing?
Yeah.
That when you're talking to clinics who are going to talk, or clinicians who are going to talk to people and, sort of promote Dafne as, for what it is not to call it an education course. Because there's a lot of people who that makes them think back to school, which was not a happy time for them.
Okay.
And there's a difference between, I'll be honest, I did okay at school and stuff. So if you tell me I'm going to do an education course, I'm quite happy about that, because I know if I turn up, even if you just hand me a book to read, I'm okay. But a lot of people aren't. And I know you're learning things on the course, but it's by discussion, it's in group things. You're never sat there doing a test, or
no, you're never.
Do you know what I mean? You're not being spoken at and whatever. And I think it does make me feel that some people turn it down because they just react to the fact that it's structured education is going to be like going back to do my GCSEs.
And I think that's a valid point. What different language would you use if you were talking about a Dafne course? How would you talk about it?
Lifelong learning. That's what it needs.
Learning or information. I don't know. I'm not saying I have a solution, which I know isn't helpful for you, because it'd be brilliant if I did. But I do think we bandy around structured education, forgetting that for some people that's a really scary thing. And you to be inclusive, which I think Dafne would be. I know the Dafne I did, we had one guy who wasn't very numerate at all on it. We discovered, quite dangerously we discovered. But anyway, but it wasn't a problem, because all that happened was that the trainers, whatever, just wrote out a little card saying, if you're counting this many carbs, this is how many units it is, because they couldn't work that out. And you only know that once they're in the room. But if he had realised that ahead of time, that he was going to have to do maths, I don't know whether he would have been in the room, but he learnt so much.
We take health literacy very seriously. Health literacy is essentially a person's ability to read and write in relation to their health. And it doesn't matter whether you left school at 14 with no qualifications, or whether you've got a PhD and you're a university professor. Health literacy problems can affect everybody at any level of education. So we have things for every Dafne course, like you've just described. We have something to help people work out how much carbohydrate they're eating, depending on what information there is on the label. So there's a chart for that. There's a chart to work out how much quick acting to give, depending on their ratio and the amount of insulin and the amount of carbohydrate they're eating. And we make that available to everyone. So we're not just picking out the one person who's struggling.
No.
It's all there. And accessibility is a big thing. So you're so right.
But if somebody knows that they had an awful experience at school, because psychologically you don't want the trauma of living through that again, that you're not even getting them through the door.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I've written that one down as well. You've given me lots of things to go back and talk about, which is brilliant. So thank you for that.
And as Mark said, there's so many of us, I think, who are very positive about Dafne, that we would be only too happy to help.
Okay, thank you very much.
If there were ever anything that we could do.
Well, I'll remember that, and I'll come back to Diabetes Chat when I need to garner your support. That would be lovely. Thank you very much.
No, that'd be great. Thank you.
That'd be great. Thanks, Liesl.
Perhaps we need to say the name 3 times and see if he appears, Father Gar.
Yeah. Can I just ask all of you a question?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yep.
What is the one question that you would like to be asked about your diabetes by either a healthcare professional or anybody else? What is the one question you wish people would ask you?
Kez?
Literally, I fell off my chair the first time someone asked me.
I can't hear Kez. Can anybody else?
Yeah, I can.
It must be me again.
And it was literally, how are you? How are you finding things?
I was just thinking exactly the same.
Okay.
How's life?
I'd like them to ask, how do you manage this?
Okie doke.
I think for me, it's the fact that it's part of my whole life. It's not a separate entity. So it's more asking about me as a whole person.
Yeah.
And it's not a
just about
number.
your diabetes,
It's not a number or anything like that. It's just how are you doing, and is there anything you're having difficulty with?
And I think that's the biggest thing I learned when I started delivering Dafne courses, was that just because I think somebody being above target before lunch is actually the issue, what's actually the issue is that they may be being bullied at work and their stress levels are through the roof, or it might be that they're going through a difficult relationship breakup, or they've just been bereaved, or they're moving house, or they're sitting exams. And I think the biggest thing I learned was that just because I think it's important doesn't mean that it's going to be the priority for somebody with diabetes. And I could bang on about being above target before lunch till I'm blue in the face, but it's going to make no difference if you get no support with the underlying issue.
And it could be at that time, it's not because of any bullying or stress, it's just you cannot afford to go low at that point. Because say, I'm making this up, I'm not a school teacher, you're a school teacher and you have to go out into the playground and you're monitoring 100 6-year-olds, and at that point you cannot go low because there's nobody else who can jump in and save you.
That's funny you should say that, Flipper.
Liz, you've got your hand up.
I just responded to Mark's thing saying that I literally did that today because like I overtreated because I didn't want to let down the young.
I can't hear Liz. Can anybody else?
I'm here.
Claire,
I just haven't said anything. Somebody's
Kez
speaking.
is just talking at the minute. Kez is just talking.
I know. Somebody just said they can't hear me.
No, but I don't think Claire can hear Kez.
Oh, sorry.
So we'll come to you once Kez has just finished. Is that okay?
Yes, by all means.
Sorry.
Yeah, it was like I was just saying, it was just that thing of I'd hit the low and then I panicked because I didn't want to let the young person I was with down because they were out when it was important to them, and so you overtreat, and it's
so true. I mean,
exactly
it's like
that.
I have that when I go to the gym. It's like I have
Mark. Can I have Liz next because she's been waiting quite a while? Sorry. Liz.
Liesl, hi, thanks, Flipper. Liesl, in response to the question that we'd like to be asked, my question is, the first thing I would like to be asked is, well, how's life going for you at the moment?
Yeah.
That's just it, because diabetes and living life go hand in hand.
Yeah. So it's asking you about you as a person and your life, and not just saying, how's your diabetes? Because it's like a separate entity then to you as a person, isn't it?
Yeah. It's just asking, how's life going? Maybe it's just an Irish thing. People here just say, well, how's life going? And it's all encompassing. It's just not talking about one thing in particular. It's giving you the opportunity to talk about what you want to talk about.
Now, I'm going to leave my last question because we've had one question from Nikki in the community, which I think is more important. She's saying she could really benefit from a Dafne course, but her eating disorder, stroke, disordered eating history makes it very triggering. Is that something Dafne are looking into?
It's something that we are very conscious of, and therefore it's something that we would say work closely with your own diabetes team. If you're in a Dafne centre, work with your own diabetes team to find the support that you need, because just because Dafne might not be right for you now doesn't mean it won't be right for you in the future. But we do recognise that if you have disordered eating or an eating disorder, then focusing on what you're eating and how much insulin you're giving can be quite overwhelming. And so it's finding the support you need so that you get to a stage where you could do the Dafne course and find it helpful rather than finding it triggering, because it may be that now is not the right time, but in 6 months' time or a year's time or 2 years' time, if you've had some support in the meantime, you might find you could benefit enormously. But your disordered eating or eating disorder and the impact that has on you, that's something that I would say get some support with that, rather than thinking that Dafne is going to be the support for that. I know that might not be the answer you want, but I think taking on a Dafne course when you've got some concerns around eating is only going to work if you've got the support around those issues as well.
Thanks for that, Liesl. I hope that's maybe answered a bit of your question, Nikki. I'm conscious that it's 10:20 and this has been an absolutely fabulous and informative evening, Liesl. So I just wanted to say thank you very much for coming to join us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. Anytime you want to come back, we can facilitate this again.
Oh, I would love to come back and listen to you all again, because I always learn. This is the second time I've been, and I learned so much listening to you. I'm just listening to you talking about parking and after the gym, and you've got to leave the car park after 3 hours. You know, it's never as simple as just treating a hypo. Diabetes is never just simple, is it? And yet, as a healthcare professional, we're often perhaps guilty of oversimplifying things. So thank you very much indeed for having me. And yeah, anytime you want me to come back, if somebody drops out at short notice and you want me to come back and just chat, I'm happy to do that.
Okay, thanks, Liesl.
Okay. Thanks very much, everyone.
You'll regret
Bye-bye.
saying that, Liesl. Thank you.
Do you want to say anything just to finish off?
No, just thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thanks, guys. I'll leave you to your own chat now, but thanks very much. Good luck with everything. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Liesl.
Bye.
Thank you.